Alright, hello everyone, Simon here. Welcome back to our Architecture of Dishonored 2 series. In this video, we are going to look at the city of Karnaca from a distance. Right, so we're just looking at the skyline of Karnaca, looking at it from a distance. So this is Karnaca. I mean, this is one side of it. It stretches, we are in the harbour, and it stretches all the way around and around and around and around, quite a long way around there. So the first thing you might notice about Karnaca is that rock there, up in the on the horizon there. So that looks a lot like the Rock of Gibraltar. If you're not familiar with the Rock of Gibraltar, the Rock of Gibraltar is a rock in Gibraltar. Alright, I'm glad I cleared that up for us. So, where is Gibraltar? Gibraltar is in the south of Spain, right at the mouth of the Mediterranean, and the Rock of Gibraltar in the real world looks like that. So if you look at some of these pictures, you'll see that the shape of it is very similar to the shape of the mountain in the game, like the shape of it is from the other angle, right? So that's the Rock of Gibraltar. It's pretty famous. I'm not too sure why they decided to basically put the Rock of Gibraltar in the game. I don't know if it's supposed to, like, suggest that there's some connection between the fictional world in Dishonored and the real world. Probably not. It's probably just because it looks cool, right? It's distinctive, it looks cool. And also, Karnaca is kind of Spanish in its climate, in its geography, and in its style. Well, maybe not geography, maybe more like its culture and climate. There's one difference between this rock here. It's called Shindere Peaks in the game. There's a difference between that and the Rock of Gibraltar is that you see there's like a crack in the rock in the game there, and that crack kind of leads into a valley that stretches all the way down into the water. So that's not in Gibraltar, right? That's not in the real game, in the real world. That will be somewhat relevant later on as we look at other parts of the game. We might talk more about that. Alright, so aside from that, you can see that there's a lot of mountains back there, right? And so there's a bay formed by the mountains, and the city sits at the bay, between the water and the mountains. In front of us we have the whaling ship. Whaling ship is metal, a steel ship, and it's carrying a whale. We saw these ships back in Dunwall a little bit, so we can see that it's the same technology and the same economy, right? They're catching whales and they bring them in, and if you're not familiar with Dishonored, they extract the whale oil from the whales and they use that for fuel as an energy resource. Beyond the whaling boat, we can see some stone buildings. It's not too clear from this distance, so we have stone buildings, and they're mostly flat-roofed because there's less rain in Karnaca. Although the game, doesn't go into that much detail with the climate. If you remember back in Dunwall, all the roofs were really steep, and I said the steep roofs means that it probably snows in winter, and so the snow, you want the snow to fall off the roof and not accumulate on the roof. And so that's why the roofs are so steep. So here the roofs are fairly flat, and in some cases I think completely flat. Which means that, well, first of all, there's no snow, and secondly, it probably doesn't rain very much either. Like, it rains a little bit, but not too much. And so you're not too worried about a lot of rain pouring onto your roof and having to shed the rain off the roofs too quickly. Can I look around and maybe those a bit closer? You see that? Can you see that? You can kind of see it. We'll get closer to these things later on in the next video and then in the following videos. Also, wind turbines. Those are very noticeable on the skyline there. Look at that. And there's some bigger ones over there. Wind turbines are... So in the game, according to the story, they are starting to run out of whales, right? So in the real world, there was a period of time when whaling was a big thing as well. In the real world also, the whales were hunted for oil, although we didn't use the oil for fuel as... I guess we did as well. We used it for fuel, but we also used it to make other things, lubrication and other purposes. But whales take a very long time to grow and to reproduce, and so in the real world they very quickly got hunted almost to extinction. And in the game, I guess there's a similar situation where they're running out of whales. So the whale catches are fewer and fewer each passing year, and they're also getting smaller. And so according to the game, the Empress has decreed a stop to whaling. Although I'm not sure if she's done it yet, maybe she does it later. I know that between the game Dishonored 2 and the expansion, there's definitely a ban on whaling. So anyway, because they're running out of whales, whale oil is becoming more and more expensive over time. And so they need a different source of energy. And that comes from the wind power, right? So those are wind turbines generating electricity to power the city and to power various things in the city, and that's actually part of the game mechanics as well. I don't know if we'll... I mean, we're not going to see much of this in action because we don't have gameplay in this series, but if you play through the game, sometimes you have the wind turbines powering security devices, and you deactivate the security by turning off the wind turbine. So that's part of the gameplay. In terms of technology though, so like economically, that's why they have wind turbines. In terms of technology though, it's a little odd to see wind turbine technology, because you need to understand that, especially wind turbines that look like that. If you look at historical windmills, you don't have these like thin airfoils as turbines. Like you would have like a big wheel and then you have like sails, right? Sail windmills. If you think of like Dutch windmills and other older European windmills. So this sort of like airfoil technology, it comes from aircraft, or it comes from our understanding of aerodynamics in terms of like airplanes. Like how do we... So when we think about technology, we need to understand how like each technology builds on previous knowledge, right? So you discover something and you use that to then invent something new, and then that allows you to make the next step and invent something new, and so on. And so technology kind of builds one thing up on another. And like our current understanding of aerodynamics comes from people trying to fly by building planes, and early on they tried to copy birds in order to fly, because birds is something that exists in the world. And so okay, we see the birds are flying in the sky, maybe we can also try flying in the sky as well, and we would try flying by copying the birds, right? And so early attempts to build planes, they would try to copy the shapes of the bird wings. And early on people didn't really understand how bird wings work, because it's this complicated aerodynamics. But as you build a plane and as you kind of fly it, and then as you kind of do it more and more, you kind of realize, okay, so the shape of the airfoil kind of curves upwards and the air flow over it, the air flows over it, and then you generate lift. So over time, by trying to copy the birds and trying to fly like a bird, you learn how to build the wing. And then, once you figure out that shape, you think, okay, what else can we use this shape for? This aerofoil shape, where it generates, lift where air flows over it in this direction. And so, from that, people develop like sails using the airfoil, and people also develop wind turbines using the foil, the shape of the foil, right? And so that's... What I'm trying to say is, in order to understand enough about aerodynamics to build your wind turbines like this, you really need to have an understanding of aerodynamics, and you really need to have an understanding of flight, or rather, like the aerodynamics involved in flight. But in the world of Dishonored, there are no planes. Like, there are no flying devices. So it doesn't really make sense that anyone could come up with this understanding of how to design the turbine without all the preceding technologies that lead to this understanding. Does that make sense? Right? Like, you can't just, jump from numerals straight to calculus, right? You need to learn all the stuff in between. You need to learn algebra. Like, for every advanced technology, you need to learn all the previous steps that lead you to understanding the advanced technology. And here we're missing the middle steps. So if you see this and there are no planes, you wonder, like, something's not right here. How did they get this idea from? In the game though, the game does have have an excuse for this stuff. Is that in the game there's magic and there's the void. The void is like a different dimension where the magic comes from. And according to the story, certain people are touched by the void. And some of these people, in the first game it was mostly Anton Sokolov is the name of the character. In this game there's a character called Bobby Jindosh. And so these two characters are like very smart, intelligent engineers and inventors. Like, they invent new technology. And in fact they invent technology that seems impossible. Like I said, like this, the wind turbines are designed by Bobby Jindosh. But it seems like he invented this without any prior knowledge of the steps that should lead to this. And the way the game explains this is that they are touched by the void. So they would sleep, they would dream about things that they see in the void, and then when they wake up, they would create these new devices and they would work. And they don't really understand how they work, or they use things from the void that they don't really understand how they work. But in the game, like, they are inspired by this kind of magical extra dimensional thing that gives them these ideas. And so and that's how the game explains the existence of what really is future technology in the game setting, right? So this is like how the game explains the way they do things that are like physically impossible. Is the void, right? It's kind of this magical thing. Like, in the real world, sometimes there are examples of bits of technology that doesn't seem like it should fit, but usually there are ways to explain it. In the game they explain it using the void. Okay, so the next thing we want to look at is beyond these turbines here, there's those things. You see those things? There's like these like tentacle things, or like branch-like things, or tubey things, or worm things. I don't know what they are. Later in the game we'll get closer to them. That's the dust district, by the way. And we will travel there and we'll get to look at these things a little bit closer up. I still don't know what they are. So they look like ducts. D-U-C-T, ducts. But they're like up in the air and they kind of don't join to anything. They like, on this end they just kind of go out to nowhere. On the other end I don't know where they go. And so there's these tubes in the air. I'm not sure what their functions are. And in fact, if you look at them, they seem too flimsy. It doesn't seem like that should be able to hold up that weight, right? Because that seems like it should be too heavy. And that seems to be like too fragile. You think the wind would just blow and the whole thing would fall apart. So I don't know what they are. It could be for controlling dust, because according to the story, we'll get to this later on as well. When we go to the dust district, it's called the dust district because there are silver mines in the mountains, and as they're churning up the rock to extract the silver, all the dust that comes out of the mines gets blown over this part of the city, and it's basically destroying the city. And maybe these things are supposed to be an attempt to try to control the dust by, blowing them out over into the ocean instead of into the city. If that's what it is, then it doesn't work because the city is covered in dust. So, I mean, that might... I mean, the most plausible explanation, I think, is that it's some sort of attempt to control the where the dust goes. But honestly, I'm not sure what those things are, but they're giant tubes in here. We'll see them closer later on. Maybe we find more evidence later. Alright, now if we walk around... Oh, we're on the ship, by the way. This is the Dreadful Whale. If you remember, we got on it back in Dunwall. We got on this ship, and now we traveled to Karnaca. So as the city goes up the mountain, you see these big ass terraces, and this one has buttresses on it too. So there's like the terrace there, a terrace there, a terrace there. The city is actually quite steep, more steep than is practical, and there are these huge stone buttresses, and then the city's buildings are built on top of the buttresses. It looks really cool, right? Like it's really picturesque and kind of romantic, but it's also not very practical. It's just because it's a lot of structure just to hold up a city. Why would you not just build somewhere more reasonable instead of up a steep mountain? But anyway, it looks cool. So there is that. And then as we come across to here, there are a few distinctive buildings that are relevant to the story. That there is the Edelmeyer Institute. This thing. It is a hospital. It's a little strange the hospital is out in the middle of the water, but it's not really a hospital for the general public. It was designed to be a hospital for rich people. And you know, back in the real world, back when cities were more polluted, rich people would like leave the city to get away from the pollution and like they'll go like recuperate in the countryside. So the idea of leaving the city to recover your health before coming back to the city to where you work. So that's a thing that's a little old-fashioned these days because our cities aren't as polluted these days, but I guess in some cities like you would still do that. Especially in big crowded cities like, you know, Tokyo, Hong Kong, New York, like you would like escape to the countryside for your vacations. So hospitals were a little bit like that in the past, especially like the hospitals for rich people. Of course, if you're poor, you can't really afford to go on a vacation, then you wouldn't do that. So that's a hospital for rich people, and we will look at that more closely later on in a different video. And then behind it, you see that triangular shape, that blurry triangular shape, you can barely see it. That is the Duke's Palace. The Duke of Karnaca lives in his palace, that's his palace there. And then behind that, there's like a rock there, and then behind that there's another part of the city. That's the industrial part of the city. We'll see that closer later on as well. Oh, there's whales, by the way. I mean, they're supposed to be running out of whales, but there's still whales in the ocean, so I guess it's not that bad. Oh crap. Yeah, I fell off the ship. Before we go anywhere else, note the position of the sun there. You're gonna have to remember that though. So just jumping ahead a little bit, north is that way, by the way. So that is almost directly east. And the sun's over there, so it's kind of like mid-morning, early morning, mid-morning kind of. So that's the time. Something to keep in mind because we will see the city in different times very soon. Before we do that though, I'm going to go into the ship because there's a map down here. This will help us understand Karnaca a bit, I think. So here's a map of Karnaca. Right there, right? We are about here in the harbour. So remember the rock of Gibraltar or Shindere Peak? That's that up there, Shindere Peak. So there's the mountain. And so down here, the dust district is here, the tube things were here. And the wind turbines, and then there's the big sweeping valley that comes down from the crack in the mountains is down here. So the sun was out in this direction, pretty much directly west. I think that means we are fairly close to the equator. Probably not quite on the equator, but like the climate, which is kind of like Spain, and the fact that the sun is almost directly west, implies that we are close to the equator. This district is there. It's called Batista Mining District on the map. Edelmine Institute, the hospital, is there on the island, right? So we are here, and then the palace, the Duke's Palace, is there. And then the industrial district I was talking about is actually behind the Duke's Palace. Most of it is hidden by the mountain here. That's the industrial district that I talked about there. Back here, there's a bit of a valley, and then the river comes down here. There's a canal there, and the river comes down here. So that's the geography, if you can memorize all that. Right, let me go back up, just to look at that again real quick. So there's the valley, that's where the canal comes in. Canal goes behind all of that, behind the palace and out. Palace there, industrial district back there, Edelmine Institute, the hospital, and then over there, the Batista Mining District, and the mountains, and there you go. Right, so that's Karnaca. I am going to load the game, because so the way the game is set up, each mission you start from the ship, you go through a part of the city, and then you go to the destination. And so we get to start from the ship every single time, and we can see the city at different times of the day. So that's pretty cool. So this is the same location, but at a different time. Let's see what we have here. Right. Aside from a different color scheme, right? Because the sun is lower in the sky, so that is east. So this is earlier in the morning than the last one. So here, the wind turbines, they're a little more visible because the light is shining directly on them. So now we can see that they're brown. And in fact, those are wooden structures holding up the wind turbines. Which is a little strange. Because wood really is not strong enough to do that. If you look at like how tall that is. That's seriously tall. So that's a wooden structure that's that big and that tall. In the real world, you can't do that. Like you don't have wooden structures that shape and that tall in the real world, because wooden's not strong enough to be that thin and that big. In fact, you can't do that because you don't have trees that big. Like if that's supposed to be a single piece of wood, then you need a tree to be that tall, and you cut down the tree and you get a piece of wood that tall, and then right? So it can't be a single piece of wood, first of all, because you don't have trees anywhere near that big. Secondly, if it's not a single tree, if it's multiple pieces of wood that's attached together to build a tower, the attachments, if it's bolted together, then the bolts and the connections where they bolt together, it's not strong enough. If you try to do that, it just break, it just collapse under its own weight, because wood is not strong enough to do this. These days, hold on, let me just turn off the little marker there. So these days, the best timber technology we have available is laminated timber, which is you take bits of wood and you glue them together. So you take relatively small, I mean they're still huge, smaller pieces of wood, you glue them together into a bigger piece of wood. And so then, if you do that, theoretically maybe you can get a piece of wood that big, but it'll be huge, right? You have to do just a lot of glue a lot of pieces of wood together to make a giant thing. But the laminated wood is only possible because we have really good glue. Glue technology is essential to this, because right, if you imagine you want a giant piece of wood to stand up like that, the glue has to be strong, very strong, stronger than the wood. Because if the glue is weaker than the wood, then it will just, when the wind blows against it, or when there's any sort of stress on it, it will just break off, right? So you need glue that is stronger than the wood itself. The glue has to work in a range of temperatures, because I would imagine what is the natural temperature? Anything from freezing up to like maybe 40, 45 degrees. Because if it just kind of melts at 30 degrees, then it's not going to survive the summer, right? So the glue has to be very strong, survive temperature. It has to be basically waterproof, right? Because if the glue is in any way water soluble, then the moisture in the air will just eventually melt the glue, and then the whole thing will fall apart. So and you also needed to ideally be like fireproof, because if your building catches fire, you don't want the glue to immediately be destroyed and then the whole thing fall apart on you again. So the glue has to like resist fire, resist water, resist temperature changes, and also be super strong. And it turns out that that kind of glue, you need like a synthetic polymers, I believe. Or in any case, you need fairly advanced chemistry to have glues that can be that good. And in the real world, that sort of thing has only been available in relatively recent decades. So these days you can get like laminated glue, laminated wood structural members, and you can build big buildings with it. But even today, it's not that common because it's actually not easy to do this. Definitely, during the Industrial Revolution, which is more or less where this game takes place, glues did not exist back then. Glues did not exist back then that are able to do that. So what I'm trying to say is that shouldn't be possible, because wood is not strong enough and it shouldn't have the glues. We don't see those kinds of glues used anywhere else in the game either. But that is if we assume that we apply real-world logic to the game. But remember what I said before, magic exists in the game. And it's possible that the wood in the game is not the same as the wood in our world. Like the whales are magic, the trees might also be magic. And later on we will see some of these trees, and I think it is kind of implied that the trees might be magic. Remember also that the city is built in stone, right? And the only things built out of wood are the new things. New high-tech things are made of wood. Low-tech things are made of stone. And if we use real-world logic, that doesn't make any sense, because it's much easier to chop down a tree and turn the wood into a building than it is to cut up a piece of stone and use the stone to build a building, right? Like, wood is lighter and easier to cut. And so if there's a lot of wood available, which there is, by the way, there's a lot of trees, then you would think they would build the city out of wood, because it's a widely available and easy to use material. But that's not what they did. What they did is they built the city out of stone. And only with the latest technology, with the high-tech stuff, did they start using wood. And that would only make sense if, for some reason, the wood is more difficult to use than the stone. Because, as I said, technology advances, right? Usually, technology just advances. And so the newer stuff should be more advanced, right? And so if wood technology is more advanced than stone's technology in this world, then that would imply that wood is more difficult to use than stone in this world, which is not the case in our world, right? Like in our world, there are a lot more wooden buildings than there are stone buildings, because wood is easier to use. In this particular city, there's a lot more stone buildings than there are wooden buildings. So things are kind of back to front, and I mean the only way you can explain that is, as I said, if the trees are magic. If for some reason the trees are actually stronger than the wood, and than the stone, I mean. Because like I mentioned this, or consider this, if you need like a really strong structure, you would choose the strongest material you have available to you. You're choosing wood. You're not choosing stone. You're not even choosing steel. You're choosing wood. Right? So the tallest structures would require the strongest materials. And what the game is telling us is that the strongest material in this city is wood, which is not the case in the real world. Okay. So that's enough about that. Let's see. Look around a bit. The city is otherwise mostly the same. Oh, those things there? Let's see, maybe we can get to the end of the boat. So connecting the hospital, Adelman Institute, connecting that to the city is like a train track that is on wooden supports. You can see them there. We'll see it closer up later on as well. Just want to point that out. So again, like the train is a new technology, and whereas in Dunwall the new technology is steel-based or metal-based, in Karnaca the new technology is wood-based. Right. And also like curvy wood-based. So the shapes are curvy and the material is wood. Behind there, the palace is more visible now that the sun is shining directly on it. You'll notice that there's like a circle thing there, and then there's like big triangle things. The triangle shape and the circle is very different from the mostly rectangular shapes of the city, right? You look at the city, they're mostly rectangles. So the palace also stands out. It kind of doesn't fit in. It's more fitting with the wind turbine, with the you know, the triangular thing there, the train thing with the triangular thing there, and then those triangular shapes. So the new technology and the new architecture are these like triangles and curves and things, whereas the old technology is stone and rectangular. Right. Alright, so keep that in mind. Gonna load the game again. And then the next time we come into Karnaca, it is night time. And this is Karnaca at night. Let me get onto the get up here. This is Karnaca at night. The moon is a little too big. I mean, it looks cool, but it's a very big moon compared to our moon. It's also like really bright. Right, so the real world isn't this bright, but for gameplay purposes, it needs to be bright enough for you to see things. If we look at the city, we will see that there's a lot of lights in the city. And this is not a trivial thing, because remember that this is not the modern world, right? This is not our world. In our world, seeing a city lit up at night, not that surprising, like we have streetlights everywhere. But the time when this game is set, we are, you know, in more or less the Industrial Revolution. Electricity does exist, there are electric lights as we saw back in Dunwall. But the electricity comes from whale oil and perhaps from wind turbines. And remember that whale oil is supposed to be kind of expensive. And if you like go back in human history, streetlights were a big deal. Like, because lighting requires energy. Like you're burning something. Either you're burning candles. These are not candles, they're too bright to be candles. Either you're burning candles, you're burning oil, burning gas, you're burning electricity. Right? It costs energy to light things up at night. And so if the city is lit up like this, it would imply that it is relatively wealthy, right? It is relatively affluent, and that energy is abundant and affordable. And like even today, if you like look at a city, the parts of the city that are either richer or more densely populated will be more lit up than other parts of the city. Usually, I mean it's not absolute, but generally, like if you look at a part of the world and there's a lot of lights in it, you know either there are a lot of people living there or the people living there are really rich because they can afford all these lights. So the fact that the city is lit up at night, I fell off the boat again. Just stop doing that. The fact that the city is lit up at night implies that the city is relatively affluent. Or at least they're rich enough to afford lighting, right? So they're not dirt poor. And it's not abandoned either. Just as a bit of a tangent, the city of Paris in the real world has the nickname the City of Light. And the reason they call it the City of Light is because Paris was actually one of the first cities to have public lighting, to have street lighting. Like, this was back in the time when, as I said, like, fuel was kind of like was not as freely available, and Paris was one of the biggest and richest and most advanced cities at the time. And so it was one of the first cities to install public gas lighting. I think it was gas lighting. And when they did it, right, it earned Paris the nickname City of Light, because it was like so remarkable that the city would be lit up at night, and it wouldn't just be pitch black. So just the fact that the city was lit up at night was remarkable back then. And so even though, so today, you might not think it's a big deal. Like, you look out the window at night and you see there's lights everywhere. Like, to us, it's not really a big deal. But you got to remember, in a historical context, being able to light up the city is actually quite remarkable, right? And the first time that happened, it was like something amazing. So given that the city has, you know, enough energy to light up like this, maybe things are doing pretty well. Like, maybe the economy is going pretty well, or maybe the whales are not as scarce as you might think. Or maybe there's more whale oil available than you might think, because they're burning something to light this place up, right? There are some lights up in Shindere Peak. I have no idea what those are. They don't look like city buildings, because the city buildings look like that, right? So there's windows, and some of the windows are lit up. So there's like little dots of light. There's like panels of light, or there are walls. I don't know what those are. And that's on purpose too. Like, it's supposed to look kind of strange. You're not supposed to know what it is. At the very end of the game, we go up there, and then we'll see that there are in fact some very strange things going on up there. For now, they're just lights in the distance. Back here, we will see that the Edelmeier Institute is not lit up. Look at that. Isn't that interesting? So unlike most of the city, Edelmeier Institute has no lights on. And that is on purpose, that's not a mistake. Edelmeier Institute is no longer a functioning hospital. It is mostly abandoned. Not completely abandoned, there should be a few lights, I think, but it's mostly abandoned. And then if we look further beyond that, you will see that the Duke's Palace is very well lit. The Duke's Palace is definitely not abandoned, and they are spending a lot of money back there. Alright, so the next one, let's go ahead and jump to the next point in time, which is this one. If we... oh, let me put my sword away. So here we have... let's see, there's the sun. We can't see the sun, but we can see the sunlight coming up there. So this is pre-dawn. Before the dawn, the stars are still out. Before sunrise. And again, everything is well lit. I don't actually have anything new to say here. I think I've said everything I have to say about this. But anyway, that's what the city looks like before dawn. Just walk around a little bit. Do I have anything else to say about this? No. Even the industrial district behind the palace is quite well lit. Okay, so this is the Karnaca Skyline for the main game of Dishonored 2. There's more though. In the expansion, Dishonored Death of the Outsider, we move over to the industrial district. So we'll move the ship behind the Duke's Palace over there. I do need to switch to a different game, so I'm gonna cut the video here, and when I come back, we'll be over there. Alright. And we're back. So this is the Karnaca city skyline in the expansion, Death of the Outsider. It's raining, it's foggy, so we don't see very much. The whaling ships are still going. And there's the rock again, just to make sure that we understand what we're looking at. So we are further away now. The mining district is there, and it's really foggy, you can't see very much, but there's Adult Mine Institute there, and then the palace is there, I believe. So we're behind the palace, and we've moved over to the industrial district. It's very foggy though, and we do get a clearer view later on. If we come back here, it's very different, isn't it? So here we have more steel, more brick, and more smokestacks. This actually looks a lot more like Dunwall. If you remember in the last video, unlike the other side of Karnaca, which had like stone and wood, and everything's kind of clean and nice. So this is very industrial. That's metal, that's sheet metal, right? And then that's brick. Brick smokestack. There's still the wind turbines. Actually, I thought, is that still wood or is that metal now? I'm not sure if that's still wood. But yeah, so it turns out Karnaca does have an industrial district, and it does look very grim, very dirty, and not very attractive at all. In fact, like, it seems a little incongruent with the other side of the city. Yeah, the style is completely different. It is kind of a different game because there's the main game and then there's the expansion. I'm not sure if this was intended from the start or if they like came up with a different idea when they made the expansion. Because like the feel of this is just completely different from the rest of Karnaca, from the other side. But anyway, I guess every city needs an industrial district, right? So here it is. A lot more metal pipes, right? A lot more brick. Unfortunately, it's super foggy here, so I do have... The next one is better though. I'm gonna load that right away. Where are we? Where are we? Here? Okay, here. Okay, this one is... I mean, it's less foggy. It's... I'm not sure what's going on here actually, because the sun is there. It implies... No, the sun's in the wrong place now. Because if we're near the equator, the sun should rise in the east, go almost overhead, and then set in the west. Not sure why the sun is there, because we shouldn't be south of the equator. Because remember, that way is north. The sun should be like there, or even there, not there. I feel like the sun's in the wrong place, unless it's not that, unless like it's just the clouds that are blocking the sun, and this is like the light coming from around the cloud. I'm not sure this makes any sense. I think they put the sun in the wrong place here. But it does look very cool. And also, I'm not sure why it's this color. Like, why it's reddish brown color. This might be air pollution. Yeah. This might just be pollution, actually. It looks really cool, but it might be, like, really heavy pollution. I didn't think Karnaca would have this much pollution, though, because if you remember on the other side, it's all wind turbines. There's no... Over there's no smokestacks. Hardly any chimneys, even, and it's just wind turbines. And you think, oh, it seems like a pretty clean, renewable energy kind of city. And then you get over here to this side, and it's all smokestacks and smog. So, like I said, I feel like the expansion is like a different feel from the original game. Not sure what's going on there. Also, you notice there's a lot less wood over here. So, if you remember, on the other side, the wood is used for the fancy stuff. The new fancy stuff is made of wood. And over here it's just metal. I guess that's still wood. Metal and brick. We can see a little further here, not too far though. So it's brick all the way. Oh, the lighting's a bit weird. It's brick all the way around. In fact, I thought I had a different... Is this all I have? I'm just thinking you don't see things very clearly. The last one there's a lot of fog, and this one there's a lot of smog. There's a pretty busy dock back there, right? There's a lot of machinery. It's a big dock too. Remember back in Dunwall I was saying the dock was too small? So this would be the right size for a dock. And then over there... you can barely see it, huh? I do think I have another save. 1, 2, 3... Yeah, no, I do have another save. Hold on. We can get a better view of this. Ah, right, I skipped one. Okay, this is the... I skipped one, my bad. So if we come to here, alright, put your sword away. There's a lot of fog over in that direction. But over here it's pretty clear. Okay, there you go. We can see the city much more clearly here. Yeah, so if you look at this side of the city compared to, if you remember what it was like over there. Stone, pretty fancy stuff. Over here we have these huge terraces. Not you. We have these huge, like, canal walls, and then the city is built on top of the canal walls. Like, that's massive. That's like a multi-story building. So imagine like how tall that is compared to like a multi-story building, which is like, you know, these things. Is the height of that. I'm not sure that's plausible. It seems a little too big. Anyway, supposedly that's the Grand Canal in Karnaca, and it's just a massive wall. And then you have the city beyond that, and it's all brick, I believe. Yeah, it's all brick. Like, you don't see any of the stone buildings. It just feels like a completely different city compared to the other side, and it's really just the other side of the canal, right? There's the canal there. Remember the valley there? The canal comes out here. Yeah, it's just a completely different city. This doesn't feel like Spain at all. This feels like... what does this feel like? This feels like industrial England. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the game designers thought they liked the London theme better than they liked the Spain theme, and they just went back to it, even though it's the wrong part of the world in the game. We don't actually see this very much though, let me remember. Yeah, no, as you play through the expansion, as you play through Death of the Outsider, you don't actually go through any industrial districts. Or you go through one industrial district, and then after that you just go back to the rich parts of the city. So yeah, I don't know. They put this in, and then it's not really in the gameplay. I don't really know. But you know, a lot of the times, when a game has an expansion, the expansion doesn't always fit the main theme or the main style of the game. I feel like that's what's going on here. Anyway, industrial district. Not sure it makes any sense, but there it is. Okay, so that's all we have for the Karnaca Skyline. So I'm going to end this video here. In the next video, we finally go into the city. And so as I said earlier, the way the game is arranged, every mission you start on the boat, you travel through a part of the city, and then you go to the destination. So the next video will be the traveling through the cities for every mission. I'm just gonna go through all the city parts of the mission because they're all kind of similar. And then after that, we'll go to each location in separate videos because those are architecturally significant. The city parts is just like city streets and they're all kind of the same. Alright, so I'm gonna end this video here. When I come back in the next video, we'll look at the Karnaca, the urban, how do you call it? The streets and shop fronts and the you know, the public parts of Karnaca. Alright, see you next time.